Estamos en vivo.
Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to introduce Cónsul Carlos Obrador, Consul of Mexico here in Philadelphia. El cónsul Carlos Obrador de México aquí en Filadelfia nos va a dar unas breves palabras. Adelante, cónsul, por favor.
Pues muchas gracias. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos todos a esta edición, nueva edición de Que Siga el Arte. En esta ocasión tenemos el privilegio de contar con dos profesores expertos en la lengua zapoteca, en la cultura. Así que nos da muchísimo gusto darle la bienvenida a Brook, Danielle, Lillenhaugen y Felipe López, quienes son profesores de Haverford College. En el caso de Brook, es profesora asociada de lingüística en Haverford College, y Felipe es el postdoctoral scholar en Community Engage Digital Scholarship de Haverford College. Bueno, quisiera yo, como preámbulo de esta charla del día de hoy, simplemente comentar datos relevantes de México. La población total de México, de acuerdo con los datos que arrojó el Censo de Población y Vivienda 2020 en México, somos 126.014.024 mexicanas y mexicanos. De ahí el dato muy relevante es que en el país 25 millones de personas se reconocen como indígenas, y de ellos 7.382.000 son hablantes de una de las 68 lenguas indígenas que se hablan en México. La Organización de las Naciones Unidas, la ONU, ha alertado sobre el riesgo de desaparición que enfrentan 40% de las 7.000 lenguas indígenas que se hablan en el mundo, y señaló que por ello el Foro Permanente para Asuntos Indígenas decretó el 2019 como el Año Internacional de las Lenguas Indígenas. Esto para destacar, resaltar la importancia para mantener vivas estas lenguas que finalmente son parte intrínseca de nuestra cultura. Hay muchas actividades que realiza el gobierno de México para sensibilizar a la sociedad mexicana acerca de la importancia de la diversidad cultural y lingüística del país, y para preservar, fortalecer y desarrollar las lenguas indígenas nacionales. Es por eso que me da muchísimo gusto nuevamente tener tanto a Brook como a Felipe, que nos van a platicar de toda la experiencia y este bagaje cultural que tiene tanto Felipe como Brook. Así que sin más preámbulo, bienvenida Brook y bienvenido Felipe.
Bueno, yo también, I also wanted to welcome you guys, for all of us, for all of our viewers that are watching us right now, and our English speakers. I also wanted to welcome them to this online session of Art Never Ends. And thank you, Consul, very much for the introduction. And well, we're happy in the Mexican Cultural Center as well to have both of you here with us today. As a very important, like Consul Obrador was mentioning, this is a very important task, not only, I mean, for the Mexican government, but for everyone, because if languages are lost, so is cultural diversity. So we cannot let that happen, right? So first of all, I would like to Brook or Felipe, if you want to say some welcoming remarks, some introduction words, please go ahead.
I guess I'll start. Secretary Lazata Yod. Stills and Yoda Resna Yod, the non Najiret, Latin Chile, when the Sha Chizastis and Shanu and Sha Juru Kali. She Cayenne Pachele Chizastis, Stills and you, Consul Carlos. I bet the wire Pachele Wendish. Hi, everyone. And translation, not everything, but I just mentioned that I talk in Zapotec, Teacha, from my community, and I was just thanking Yvette and the Consul Carlos for Obrador for allowing us to have this discussion, and hopefully it will be very productive, and I hope that you guys have a lot of questions for us. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Brooke, do you want to say something?
It's hard to follow that, isn't it? But I'll say also, Zakushin Ratayuptu, buenas tardes, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here to be part of this discussion.
Gracias.
Well, thank you all. And I guess without a further delay, I would like to ask, well, of course, the experts some questions, right? And first of all, I'm very curious about something especially with you, Brooke. You being an American, I mean, you're an American, you don't look with any type of indigenous background. Maybe I'm wrong, but you certainly don't appear that way. How an American like yourself got involved with this Zapotec culture, this Zapotec world?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not Native, and I'm not Mexican. And people ask me this a lot. I think people are often curious how this came to be part of my world. And I love telling the story because I had just started graduate school at UCLA, graduate school in linguistics. So that means I must have been about 22. And my first exposure to Zapotec, I didn't know what Zapotec was through reading Felipe's dictionary that was about to be published. So he and Pamela Monroe were about to publish a 9,000 word dictionary on his language, and they needed someone to proofread it. And I was the baby graduate student that was hired for that job. And so my first exposure was reading the dictionary of his language, word by word, twice. And after that, I became so interested in the Zapotec language, and then also started working with Zapotec diaspora communities in Los Angeles. So that was really my first exposure to hearing Zapotec was in Santa Monica. And Felipe can say if this is true or not, but you used to be able to go to Mass in Santa Monica in Zapotec. And then I think it was 2 or 3 years later, I went to Oaxaca, and now it's been 20 years that I've been learning from Zapotec teachers and activists like Felipe.
Wow. And before you began reading that dictionary, Felipe's dictionary, do you have an idea of what Zapotec was, or you've never been to Mexico at that point, or you were a little bit familiarized with Mexican culture at least?
I think I had been to Ensenada, with my parents. So really, no, I had not been to Mexico. And I was interested in Indigenous languages of the Americas. I came with that interest to graduate school, but I had never heard of the Zapotec people. And it's even hard to imagine that now, where my life is, where now I can't imagine not continuing this work. It's a commitment I have now for the rest of my career.
Very interesting, Brooke. And I met you like maybe 2 years ago, and later on I met Felipe. And at that point, when I met you, you guys you and your team of students, and I guess Felipe, he was also involved in this project, in this documentary web series that was called Tisa Navani, Living Language, right? How was that idea born, and why?
Yeah, so I just put the link in the chat, and I don't know if someone can pass that on to Facebook. So one of the things, I started off by saying I'm not Native, I'm not Mexican, so what is my role in this work, right? Obviously here Felipe is a native speaker, and I work with so many teachers and activists. And so one of the things that I see my role as is as a professor, as an academic, I'm able to apply for funding, I'm able to apply for grants, seek opportunities. I have really talented students at Haverford College that can work on projects with me. So when this opportunity came up to apply for a grant to do documentary summer work, I went to one of my Zapotec partners, Moises Garcia Guzman, and he always talks about his Zapotec agenda. And so I said, Moises, this is an opportunity. Could you envision using a team of students making a documentary, for your Zapotec agenda? And right away he was like, yes, I know what we would do, try to go for it. And so once I heard that he was enthusiastic, we went and applied for the money, and we got the money. And yeah, that was the beginning of it. When we went to Oaxaca that summer, we did it all in one summer. We didn't know what the end product would look like because we really wanted it to be something that was collaborative and that we didn't come in already with a vision of what it would be. And what it ended up being was a documentary web series. If it has now made its way over to Facebook, anyone can check it out. It's free and available to the public. It's trilingual because we want English listening, Spanish listening, Zapotec listening, our audiences to all enjoy it. So yeah, check it out.
Trilingual, just like our interview right now. So it's good. Felipe, me encantaría poder hablar en zapoteco y preguntarte en zapoteco, pero pues no sé, entonces en español va a tener que ser. Bueno, ¿nos puedes decir un poco de este serie documental, Disa Navani? Más o menos de qué, bueno, ya sabemos que se trata de la cultura zapoteca, obviamente, pero ¿qué es lo que toca o qué puntos importantes de la cultura zapoteca es lo que vamos a ver en este serie documental?
Bueno, primeramente yo creo que después damos cursos allá con ustedes para los que se interesen en el instituto. Y claro que sí, pues ese documento se trata de la relación entre la lengua, identidad y la vida cotidiana en una población del Valle de Tlacula, que es Tlacochahuaya. Y este web series tiene un esfuerzo y va viendo históricamente estos esfuerzos de los miembros de la comunidad, incluyendo los que trabajan en el campo, los artistas, educadores y el cabildo, ¿no? Y para mantener y revalorizar el uso del zapoteco en contra de la discriminación indígena, pues como el cónsul ha dicho, hay mucho que dar a conocer a la comunidad del por qué, ¿no? Estas lenguas han sido borradas a través del tiempo. Entonces, es parte de eso, de visibilizar, si tú quieres, la lengua, la cultura y de qué manera esta comunidad pues realmente está tratando de retomar nuevamente su lengua, porque parte de la identidad es intrínsecamente en una lengua, ¿no? Tu identidad, tu historia. Entonces, esa es la parte que realmente resuena en esta serie de web. Y bueno, yo sé que tú has visto el documental y uno de los capítulos de mis favoritos capítulos es La danza de la pluma, y no sé cuál sea tu capítulo favorito ahí, ¿no? Pero esa es la mía. Pero en síntesis, eso se trata del Disanabani.
Oh, qué interesante, Felipe. Pues sí, espero que todos los que nos están viendo y escuchando, pues tengan la curiosidad y se metan a esta serie documental web, porque sí está muy interesante, sí tienes razón, yo la vi hace 2 años y la voy a volver a ver porque sí, el mensaje es muy bonito y uno aprende muchísimo de otros mexicanos que es una comunidad que deberíamos de apreciar, ¿no? No, al contrario, darles, como tú dices, la visibilidad que merecen, porque pues se está perdiendo y no podemos permitir eso. Bueno, y un poquito otra pregunta que pues no sé si el cónsul, usted interrúmpame cuando necesite.
Sí, tal vez para una duda ahorita que estoy escuchando a Brook y a Felipe, es, digamos, de los estudiantes, las personas con las cuales ustedes tienen interacción en el colegio, digamos, el interés por el zapoteca es más, digamos, por parte de los estudiantes anglos o es un mix. ¿Qué nos pueden decir? ¿Son estudiantes también latinoamericanos, mexicanos? ¿Quiénes son las personas interesadas aquí en la lengua?
Bueno, en mi caso, que yo he enseñado el zapoteco en la UCLA y la Universidad de California en Los Ángeles, UCSD, que es la Universidad de California San Diego, y he dado talleres aquí en Harvard College. Y obviamente pues son para los estudiantes que están ahí, ¿no? Y mi experiencia es de que la mayoría o un poquito más de la mitad han sido los no latinos. Los que están muy interesados específicamente porque muchos están en el área de lingüística, entonces necesitan esas herramientas. Historiadores que están estudiando también la historia zapoteca, por ejemplo, y aquí en Harvard College, y creo que a lo mejor Brook puede hablar un poquito más de eso, el interés es por lingüistas, pero también alumnos y alumnas que están interesados en entender cómo leer el zapoteco del periodo colonial, pero en sí, ¿no? Y yo, en mi caso, como te he comentado, la mayoría suele ser no latino. Y los que han tomado mi curso, algo muy, muy interesante, me parece que a pesar de que no son zapotecos, por ejemplo, en el caso de los mexicoamericanos, una cosa que noté realmente, que ven al aprender una lengua como es una lengua originaria como es el zapoteco, lo ven con una conexión con México, con su pasado, a pesar de que no sean zapoteco. Entonces, sienten ese orgullo de decir es una lengua de mi comunidad como indígena o descendiente indígena. Para mí fue lo más interesante de que de repente veían en la lengua un gran orgullo.
Ok, sí.
Qué interesante. Qué interesante, Felipe.
Brook, creo
Bueno,
que iba a comentar algo.
Brook.
No.
Pues no, es casi igual en mi caso. Quizás 20% de los alumnos son mexicanos, pero la mayoría son no latinas y quizás vienen con sus intereses de lingüística, pero que también quizás vienen con interés de aprender cómo hacer ese tipo de trabajo multicultural, multilingual, colaborativo y quizás, no sé, ese sirve para muchas carreras, ¿no? Poder hacer obras grandes en contextos culturales muy complejos.
Okay. Y Felipe, ¿cómo tomó la comunidad zapoteca, cómo tomó esto que tú fueras o que un grupo de ustedes vienen de Estados Unidos, llegan a la comunidad zapoteca? ¿Cómo tomaron, cómo reaccionó esa comunidad cuando ustedes les cuentan el proyecto? Y al final de cuentas, pues, digo, su intención es buena, que es darle visibilidad a esta comunidad, pero ellos lo vieron así como ustedes lo están viendo o lo vieron más como vienen aquí no sé, algún tipo de malentendido de explotación aquí en nuestra cultura, no sé, algo así, porque yo sé, he tenido contacto con otras comunidades y yo sé que hay comunidades muy cerradas y que no les gusta ni que tomes fotos, obviamente, ni ciertas cosas. Acá, ¿cómo fue? ¿Cómo fue el encuentro con ustedes?
Pues mira, son relaciones que hemos cultivado por muchos, muchos años. Entonces nosotros trabajamos solamente con comunidades que quieran trabajar con nosotros, ¿no? En el caso de Sanabani, pues ya teníamos una relación o más dicho, Brook tenía una relación con un líder comunitario, Moisés García Guzmán. Entonces, eso fue el link, ¿no? El enlace de la comunidad. Y seguimos todos los protocolos necesarios para una comunidad, porque tú bien lo mencionas que muchas veces pues hay cierto recelo o cierta duda, ¿no? De las intenciones de las personas que van a trabajar en las comunidades. Y yo inclusive como zapoteco hablante y como comunero de una comunidad zapoteca en Oaxaca, yo tuve que seguir todos los protocolos trabajando como dice Navani, por ejemplo, fuimos a hablar con anterioridad con los con el cabildo, con el presidente municipal, la comunidad, antes de iniciar el proyecto, les dijimos, obviamente con Moisés fue el que encabezó porque era el enlace y él es parte de la comunidad donde se hizo este trabajo, lo que queríamos hacer y una vez que tuviéramos el permiso, terminado el proyecto, pues se le entregaron los materiales, todos los materiales, el raw data, como dicen, para que ellos lo usaran. Entonces también se entregaron más de 300 copias del proyecto ¿cómo se llama? El USB.
¿En USB?
USB, para aquellas personas que no tengan internet, para que todos tuvieran acceso a su propia historia y a lo que hicimos más que todo, ¿no? Y lo que se entregó al Cabildo también fue todo el trabajo que no estaba cortado en sí, para que lo usaran para sus propósitos, para promover la comunidad. Entonces, yo creo que no, por lo menos en mi experiencia, no hemos tenido un acercamiento que no se nos haya invitado. Todos los proyectos son invitados y tenemos proyectos de diccionario en línea que últimamente nos han invitado 3 comunidades más, pero con esta pandemia pues no hemos podido tener ese acercamiento y yo creo que es la manera que trabajamos, ¿no? Que es un compartimiento de mutuo, de respeto hacia las comunidades y pues vamos a seguir trabajando así con todo el respeto que los pueblos originarios se merecen, ¿no? Entonces no vamos a meternos con una comunidad en donde sentamos o que no, sentamos que no es apropiado o no quieren que estemos ahí. Pero es la invitación más que todo, el primer paso de las comunidades hacia nosotros.
Ok, interesante,
I
perfecto.
wonder, could I add something, Yvette?
Sure, please go ahead.
Because I think this also really applies to me as an outsider, right? And to the students that I bring in. And I think on top of everything that Felipe explained about how we work, it's also a recurring conversation that we have with ourselves, within the group, with the students, really thinking about, what is this collaboration working the way we hope? Are we being respectful? Are we imposing? This has to always be on the table, right? And we always have to be humble and willing to really consider our position. And in this case, one decision that we made was that we would not initiate any interviews or any topics. We would only allow our Zapotec partner in that town to bring forward the people that he thought we should interview or the topics he thought we should cover, so that to the extent that we can, these things are very complicated, right? The very fact that we were there and we were outsiders is complicated, but to the extent that we can, we wanted to tell the story that he wanted told.
Tenemos un comentario de Carmen Guerrero, quien nos dice que soy indígena celtal, Chiapas. No somos comunidades cerradas, menciona ella. Hemos sido muy abusados, segregados y tratados con extremo racismo. Esto desafortunadamente es cierto. En México las comunidades indígenas sufrieron muchísima discriminación y hay una deuda pendiente con los pueblos originarios y considero que se está haciendo todo lo posible por revertir por parte del gobierno federal y de diferentes organizaciones que están empujando para ese reconocimiento de las contribuciones de los pueblos indígenas, los pueblos originarios de México. No sé, Felipe, si quieras comentar algo al respecto del comentario de Carmen.
Sí, yo creo que pues hay una deuda histórica con las comunidades originarias, ¿no? Y muchas veces yo creo que también es una corresponsabilidad, yo lo veo muchas veces, por ejemplo, yo como zapoteco hablante y como activista en promover mi lengua, y lo he estado haciendo desde 1992, de que si bien ha habido este racismo histórico y el trabajo que nosotros hacemos de cierta manera va visibilizándonos por un lado y por el otro pidiendo que se abran espacios especialmente educativos. Por ejemplo, en Oaxaca apenas pasaron una iniciativa para que la Secretaría de Pueblos Indígenas pueda empujar políticas públicas para que las lenguas sean usadas en instituciones, ¿no? Pero yo creo que son dos cosas. Por un lado, tenemos las iniciativas y políticas públicas de estar empujándolas, pero por el otro, también nosotros tenemos que también empujar y hacer ver y que de cierta manera, pues esas políticas públicas, pues también sean servidas para nosotros, porque si lo dejamos a un lado y no nos involucramos, yo también creo que pues tienen que ser ambos, ¿no? Tanto los que son responsables de las políticas públicas como la ciudadanía y los grupos a lo mejor no gubernamentales en ese sentido, pero yo creo que en cierta manera sí, es muy importante hablar de lo que decía la compañera, que sí hay este sentimiento histórico de que se nos ha visto en cierta manera como un problema para el desarrollo de México y tenemos que buscar mecanismos para superar eso.
Claro, pues un mecanismo perfecto es lo que los proyectos que ustedes tienen, que es dando visibilidad, ¿verdad? A estas comunidades, en este caso, pues la Zapoteca. I want to get a little bit back to English, so all our English speakers can also learn about this beautiful project. So Brook, I wanted to ask you, once the documentary was done, once you finished producing, making, and editing and everything, and you started showing it here in the US, what was your feeling? Was the objective of this documentary fulfilled? I mean, do you like the reaction of the viewers? Do you think, like, did you get that sense of, okay, we did what we accomplished what I wanted? Was it like that, or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's a good question. It had a really positive response. So we ended up showing it in film festivals and in events, I think over 30 film festivals and events, mostly though in the US and Europe. So it was actually, there was a lot more interest and it was easier to get it accepted in film festivals and in the US and Europe. Even though I submitted to film festivals in Mexico, there was less interest there. But to be clear, we did go back and show it. We had a showing in Tlacochoaya and we had a showing, couple showings in Oaxaca City. One film festival that was really exciting to show it at was the Smithsonian's Mother Tongue Film Festival, which happens every year and is open to the public at the Smithsonian. And for the viewers watching right now, this year it's online. So check it out. There's lots of native languages, including other languages of Mexico. And at one of the web series festivals, we won the Social Impact Award for the web series. So that was really good. And in terms of the question about impact, I think we envisioned multiple levels of impact. So one objective was to create awareness. I mean, many people, many white Americans maybe don't even know Zapotec exists. But also many people that I've met, even in Mexico, maybe don't know that Zapotec is still spoken and maybe haven't really thought about what the daily life of folks look like who are fighting against this indigenous discrimination, like the compañera was talking about. And that's historical, but also ongoing, right? Also continues to happen. And so I think in terms of the raising awareness, I think we added our grain of sand to the work with this web series. But I think a more important and a bigger objective would be to create real social and policy change. And that kind of work is really slow work. But we can say that at least in a very local area, we have seen some change in Tlacolula area, and especially in some high schools that we work with. And so even though the work is really hard, I think we feel hope most of the time. Does that sound right, Felipe?
Yeah, and I think that something really important, I think that we need to highlight. I mean, since we are speaking to we're all here through the internet, but especially here in the States, right? Many times people think that the fact that you are Mexican, you speak Spanish, it's an assumption, it's a given, right? Because Mexico is a multi-ethnic, linguistic society, but yet the concept that many Americans have is about the mestizo ideology, and if you are Mexican, they assume that your mother language is Spanish, right? And why do I say that? I say that because in terms of public policies and providing services in the US, that if you know somebody is Mexican, you don't even think about they might speak another language. And it's by negating that, it's such a detriment to the indigenous communities, because some of them don't speak Spanish fluently. So how can, even though they're paying taxes in the US and all that, but there is a limited access to public aid, if you will. So I think also in terms of American society, this is really, and I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because they need to understand that Mexican is a multi-ethnic society, and people speak many languages, not just Spanish. So when they migrate, they find a lot of trouble in accessing help for whatever that might be, because I've been an interpreter in federal courts here in the US. And it's really hard for them to think like, oh, but you're Mexicans, why don't you speak Spanish, right? And they don't have this interpreter services for indigenous communities. So it's not only Mexico that, we need to give this visibility to the indigenous communities, indigenous language, but it's also in the US, because it impacts real people's real, the real people's lives. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think that we can just talk about indigenous people in Mexico because we are also here. And how do we begin to really understand the complexity that Mexican migration brings to the US?
You just raised a very interesting point, Felipe, which is that many languages that, besides Spanish in Mexico, I was reading at the beginning that in Mexico, at least 68 languages are spoken. But even within the Zapoteca language, like there are many variants. Could you comment about those variants?
Sure, probably a linguist would be better to do that, but I'll try my best. Zapotec is a family language. So it means that, let's think about Zapotec as the Romance language, right? So when you speak about Romance languages, what do we think about? We don't ask you, hey, you speak, or we don't say that you speak a Romance languages, right? But within the Romance language, we have French, we have Spanish, we have Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, right? I mean, the major languages. So we need to think about Zapotec in that, at that level. So unfortunately, Zapotec it's a false name, if you will, because it's a family of languages. So, and just remember that Zapotec, it was imposed by the Nahuatls, right? So in each Zapotec community, they have a way of saying their own variation. So yes, that's another challenge that we have, that, for example, when I was doing interpreting in courts, they would say, they needed somebody who spoke Zapotec, and they would say, hey, we have somebody here, and especially in hospital or in the ICE immigration offices, and they would say, we need an interpreter, can you come and help us? So I would arrive there, and then I would ask the judge and say, like, before I begin, could I say something to the person, see if I understand, if our language is compatible, all right? And the judge will say, do you speak Zapotec? And I say, yes. So, and then you say, go ahead. So the person will start talking in the variation. I would not be able to help that person. I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand that person. So there was much confusion in that regards, because people don't understand what does it mean when we say, when we talk about Zapotec languages. So that it's really complicated. There are many variations. Even linguists, I think that they debate like how many varieties. Some of them say 20, some of them say 40. But I think that slowly we are getting there and getting the word out that Zapotec is not one language, it's a family of languages, and it is really complicated.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Brook, anything you would like to add or comment about the difference?
I'll just add, the number that INALI puts out, about 68 languages, indigenous languages in Mexico, it really should say language families. So it's not just Zapotec. So Mixtec counts once in that number. And boy, there's how many Mixtec languages, right? So really that number underrepresents the linguistic diversity in Mexico.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
So Well, this is very, everything you're telling us, both of you, it's very interesting. I would like to know, I know you had this project, the first one was Disa Navani, but now you have other projects. You have Teacha, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Teacha, yes? So now you guys have Teacha and other projects. Could you tell us what's the purpose of this other one? What is Teacha? And if you can tell us, like, if it's the same as in with the documentary, are Americans more curious about Teacha than Disa Navani, or how has the public received this new project of yours?
Yeah, thanks, Yvette. So I just put in the chat the link. There's an English and a Spanish side, so maybe that can be passed on the Facebook. Teacha is a really exciting project. So I don't know if the listeners or folks know that Zapotec has actually one of the longest histories of alphabetic writing in the Americas. In fact, the first grammar of Zapotec was published before the first grammar of English was published. And there's hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts and books written in Zapotec language between 1565 and mid-1700s. Most Zapotec people that I've talked to are unaware that this exists. In fact, they're often told that their language can't be written or their language has never been written. Zapotec was written even before this. Zapotec has a 2,500-year history of writing, right? And a really deep history of alphabetic writing. So we have this opportunity where it's this huge corpus of alphabetic texts. Zapotec people would really like to know about them. They're not taught about them in school, and all the ideologies around this devalue Zapotec language. And so our team set out to digitize and collect these manuscripts, which are stored in archives all around the world, in the US, in Mexico City, in Europe. We created digitized versions of these and have them available on that website for anyone to use with permissions of the archives. In addition to the high resolution images, we have transcriptions, and we are starting translations and cultural notes. And all of this is done, again, with an interdisciplinary team that includes Zapotec people and non-Zapotec people like myself, because we really want to make sure that the work we're doing reflects Zapotec knowledge and lived reality, and that it's useful for Zapotec folks. And that leads into your last question, Yvette, and I think Felipe has some numbers on who's accessing Teacha, where they're coming from.
Yes, fortunately, I think that we have numbers, data, since so we can talk about them. We have our analytics, and according to our analytics, over 1 year, 68% are from the US, 27% from Mexico, 4% from Europe, and 1% from the rest of the world, including other Latin American countries. So of the visitor from Mexico, 58% come from Oaxaca. So I think what we suspect is that those in Europe are mostly for academic reasons, and those from the US could be from also academics. But also let's remember that there are so many Oaxacans in the diaspora. We have, slightly over 2 million Oaxacans living in the US. So maybe, and also the new generation, we just think that, maybe those are the ones that are looking at Teacha project. And, this Teacha could be used for or in interest of those in the field of history, linguistics, anthropologists, and digital scholarship, and probably those are looking, those of people who are looking at the Teacha project from Oaxaca. Maybe they're doing it for personal reasons, since these documents represent really our history that long has been forgotten. And in a way, I've personally worked with the project, and it's a way of really recovering our history, our voices. So it's an incredible resource and open source that, I invite everyone who is interested in Mesoamerican history, for example, or languages, they should take a look at that if you are in those fields or just out of curiosity. So they're free, and Brook just put the where you can look at them, and some of the document that she talked about, you can even download this, and those are free. That the Teacha, especially Brook, has done all the work of going to different archives. I think like 3 years ago, we went to Seville and trying to look at some documents. So a lot of them are in either Europe, in the US, or Mexico City, some of them the city of Oaxaca. But the Teacha project really brings them to the community at large.
Okay.
And now that you, Brooke, have finished, and Felipe, these two projects, like what are the lessons or what new things have you learned from the Zapotec community that you can share with us?
The list is so long. I need to write a book, a memoir. I'm always learning so many things. I guess I'll share two things. One is a linguistic thing. I am a linguist after all. Zapotec has a wonderful counting system that's a base 20 counting system. And just really looking at how counting in that way works, right? So a way of saying 60 would be something like, I'm sorry, a way of saying 58 would be something like 2 away from 60. So these 20s are these landmarks. And that means that 100 isn't that special. 100 is 5 20s, but 200 is special, right? So we have these landmarks if we have a base 10, like we do in English and Spanish, where 100 things start over the new count, right? And then 1,000. But of course, those are different if you're going 20 by 20 chunks. And, you know, just spending time with that system and thinking about, gosh, how much is the way I do math? How much is the way that I count affected by the way my language structures numbers? And really trying to imagine what it would be like if my first language was a language that took chunks at 20 instead of chunks at 10. And then at the same time, reflecting on places like Monte Alban, places where there must have, you know, all of this mathematical knowledge being put to work by the architects, by, you know, the city planners, the urban planners, and yeah, just kind of really sitting with all of what that means. And I guess the other thing I'll share with you that I've really been thinking a lot about lately, you know, I do this, my work as a linguist alongside activists like Felipe, but not only Felipe. You've heard us talk about Moises Garcia Guzman, Janet Chavez Santiago from Teotitlan, and I really admire the work that they do and have learned a lot about what doing this work means from getting to be alongside of them in this. And one thing that I was surprised, I never thought about when I was an undergrad and I would read about this work, is how lonely the work is. Felipe, Moises, Janet, the people who are working, doing this resistance work are often working almost alone in their communities, or maybe with a few other people. And that's not something I had really thought about before, because the work itself is hard enough, right? The work itself is hard enough, but then to have this work where you're constantly pushing against years of history and then ingrained ideologies and battling racism, like the compañero said in the chat, all of that, and then, you know, being alone in it. And so sometimes it's interesting, like I have a PhD in linguistics, but sometimes I wonder if part of my contribution is, you know, helping to make a community that supports folks that are doing this really hard work.
Yeah, if I may add something that struck me, you know, in a sense that we've talked at the very beginning, I think that Consul Carlos mentioned, you know, the discrimination that has, in a way, erased some of the history of indigenous communities in Mexico, and also the value of languages to think is not a real language, and there is no place for it in education, right? That it's static, it's traditional, Spanish modern. But I think that what Brooke just said, it really illustrates that Zapotec, it's, you know, it has scientific value, right? And for me as a Zapotec speaker, I think that what Teacha really brought to me is really the recovering some of the words, they're recovering or passed through these documents. For example, as more and more people are speaking Spanish, the language shift right towards Spanish, people are borrowing those concepts in Spanish. For example, counting, which is real simple, right? And a lot of young people who think that the language has little value or no value, they start to really incorporate Spanish into the counting system, losing that special system that exists in Zapotec ideology. So now, for example, they would say for 60 or so, yeah, they would take the Spanish word and they say sen or chen, right? But doing the research with the documents and Teacha, it really opened my eyes and like, you know, there are words that I've heard from my grandmother. And then all of a sudden I was able to really reaffirm those words that, you know, we can count to, I don't know, you know, I can give it, but we're able to count with our own system. So that for me has really reinforced and really fueled my activity as a Zapotec, trying to encourage others to really rethink about their own language, that we have something to contribute to society with our history, with our language, and enriching our society with our knowledge. So I thought that what she said was really important, just in terms like, yes, there were Zapotec probably planners that use math and science, you know, but nowadays we don't think about that. We just like, okay, that's an old language. It's ancient language, as many times it's being called. And also, I really want to go beyond the preservation of Zapotec in museums and looking into real lives.
Okay. Pues muy interesante los dos lo que nos han estado diciendo. Ahorita quiero hablar un poco en español porque ya hemos hablado mucho en inglés para cambiar un poco. No sé, Felipe, con todo lo que me estás comentando también tú, Brook, sé que por ahí, y de hecho al principio de esta sesión lo volviste a repetir, la idea de poder tener algún curso en zapoteco. A mí me gustaría ahorita que estamos al aire, a lo mejor gente que nos está viendo, pues que nos manden sus mensajes. Si están interesados en un curso en zapoteco, pues aquí tenemos al experto Felipe, que ya dijo que está interesado. Pues mándenos su mensaje y estaría genial que podamos armar un curso que Felipe nos pueda dar, como unos, pues a lo mejor algo básico de lo del zapoteco, porque eso ya lo traías tú como proyecto, ¿cierto, Felipe?
Sí, creo que la última vez que hablamos, ¿no? En el pasado, pues yo ya había enseñado, empecé y creo que fue una de las primeras instituciones, tanto en México como aquí en Estados Unidos, empecé a enseñar el zapoteco en la Universidad de California en San Diego en el 2005. De 2005 a 2007, después de ahí enseñé en la UCLA, en la Universidad de California en Los Ángeles, hasta el 2011 y últimamente he estado dando talleres de zapoteco aquí en Harvard College y actualmente también estoy dando cursos de zapoteco en una universidad allá en Oaxaca que se llama, es una universidad muy nueva que apenas se creó este año. Y ahí estoy dando un curso de zapoteco también, entonces, y también hemos dado cursos y talleres de zapoteco a algunos bachilleres en Oaxaca. Y ahora como estamos en línea, creo que sería interesante hacer un ejercicio a través a lo mejor del instituto. Yo estaría en la mejor disponibilidad de charlar, de hablar sobre la cultura, la lengua zapoteca, o si quieren aprender la lengua, adelante, que ahí comuníquense con Ivette, va a ser nuestra organizadora, pero sí, ¿no? Se ha cumplido eso, ¿no? Mi deseo de enseñar el zapoteco en una universidad en Oaxaca y también pues aquí en Estados Unidos. Y seguimos buscando espacios y mecanismos en la educación superior como la media superior.
Perfecto, pues le vamos a tomar la palabra a Felipe para que las personas que estén interesadas nos puedan escribir, contactar y nosotros con muchísimo gusto podemos organizar pues alguna charla, algo, pasaríamos la información a Felipe. Yo quisiera señalar que la Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores, por medio de los 50 consulados en Estados Unidos, tenemos un programa, es el Programa Nacional de Intérpretes y Traductores en lenguas indígenas. El PEAMI, perdón, tenemos la Plataforma Especial de Atención a Migrantes Indígenas, PEAMI, de la Secretaría, pero también tenemos acceso como Relaciones Exteriores al Padrón Nacional de Intérpretes y Traductores en Lenguas Indígenas, el PANITLI, del Instituto Nacional de Lenguas Indígenas, el INALI, que permite identificar posibles intérpretes. Esto lo comento porque como la la compañera Carmen Guerrero, que nos escribió hace un rato, se identifica ella como indígena celtal, pues que conozca ella y las otras personas que puedan escuchar y ver este programa, que tenemos manera de apoyarlos en los servicios que requieran de atención consular, protección consular en su lengua materna. Bueno, señalar también pues un zapoteca universal, que no podemos dejar de hablar de él, ¿verdad? De nuestro presidente Benito Juárez García, quien fue presidente entre 1858 y 1872. Bueno, quien acuñó la frase: entre los individuos como entre las naciones, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Simplemente para recordar a un ilustre zapoteca.
Qué dato tan interesante, Cónsul. Pues sí, ya saben los que nos están viendo que necesitan pues algo de apoyo para un tipo de traducción, pues siempre pueden también preguntar al consulado, porque pues finalmente, como dice Felipe, ¿no? El que encontremos a mexicanos de esta parte en este lado del mundo, aquí en Estados Unidos, pues no necesariamente quiere decir que esa persona sabe hablar español y pues mucho menos inglés, ¿no? Entonces, pues aquí hay un apoyo más que todos podemos utilizar, o las personas que se sientan que lo necesitan pueden utilizar. Y bueno, pues antes de irnos, a mí sí me gustaría preguntarles a Felipe, a Brook. Yo sé que ustedes tienen muchos proyectos ahorita, digo, nos han platicado ya de varios, aquí solamente tuvimos oportunidad de hablar de 2 concretamente, pero ¿tienen ustedes algo que nos quieran compartir, que quieran hablar de algún proyecto en particular o que vayan a tener algún proyecto próximo del que quieran hablar ahorita?
A ver, sí, creo que de hecho apenas hicimos un release de unos materiales en zapoteco que está abierto al público. Es totalmente gratis. Es un curso de 10 semanas que utilizo yo en las universidades en el sistema de cuatrimestres. Entonces, a ver, Brook creo que ya puso la liga en el chat, en donde pueden accesarlo. Y decidimos hacerlo abierto, con la intención de tenerlo como multimedia, un libro de texto de multimedia. Y también tenemos, ahí pueden ver, también yo hice un canal de zapoteco que también lo inicié en el tiempo de la pandemia. Cuando yo inicié a enseñar el zapoteco en la Universidad de California en San Diego, pues ya no eran cursos presenciales y me vi en la necesidad de crear todo un curso que usé ahí y al igual está a la par con el libro, con el recurso. Es totalmente gratis para que les interese, especialmente a aquellos jóvenes que siempre han querido aprender una lengua indígena. Creo que esta es su oportunidad. Al igual puede ser usado para un curso o para enseñarse por sí mismo una lengua de las lenguas originarias, ¿no? Tenemos 10 lecciones y próximamente estaremos tendremos disponible 14 lecciones más para fines de este año. Entonces, esa es la meta que tenemos, de que haya más lecciones. Serían 14, creo que serían 3 tomos de material didáctico en zapoteco, que eventualmente lo vamos a tener en español, pero ahí está disponible para los que gusten, y Brook ya puso el enlace para quien quiera, y pues, y además nuevamente les hago la cordial invitación de que si gustan hacer ese tallercito a través de Ivette y del cónsul Carlos, con muchísimo gusto podemos hablar de la cultura, de la lengua zapoteca, de lo que ustedes gusten, pero en fin.
Muchas gracias. Gracias, Felipe.
Muchas gracias. Brook, do you want to add something to what Felipe just said about future projects that maybe you and your team are thinking of?
No, I think he covered it, but I'd love to say thank you if that's I guess one thing I'll put in the chat would just be to follow Felipe on Twitter. I just put his Twitter in the chat. Maybe it can be passed on Facebook. If you've loved learning about Zapotec language and culture from a Zapotec educator, you know, if you're on Twitter, you can learn from him every day, and you'll see Zapotec language and see when we release more of these lessons that he just talked about. So that's a place people can go as well.
Yeah, before we go, I really want to make an invitation to those who use Twitter, because I think that, I don't know if you ever thought about using Twitter in an indigenous language, but we do that. So it's not just Zapotec. We use hashtag Usa tu voz. You can find languages from Mexico, Central America, and South America, indigenous languages. Bueno, para terminar, solamente les quiero comentar, no sé si hayan pensado aquellos y aquellas que hablan una lengua originaria, que nuestras lenguas pueden estar en las plataformas digitales. Tenemos un proyecto de Twitter, donde yo tuiteo, y no solamente el zapoteco, pero hay otros compañeras y compañeros de Latinoamérica, de Estados Unidos, de Canadá, de toda Latinoamérica, que están tuiteando en su propia lengua. Ahora sí estamos sumando esfuerzo para darle visibilidad a nuestras lenguas, y pues no me resta más que agradecerles por ese tiempo. Shikayenan, churu shayenan, parchile chizastis, gran chizah, tiennoel, arnieran, que dershow de stis, perlua, la rjudana stis, churna, kakwan, stis, lo tweet, kakwani, lo diccionario lo vi, kakwani, zindatan, kakwani, la, balruin dos Twitter, la, olikwashi, kwaten, kakneta, no, la, con hashtag usa tu voz. Churu con la cuando están @dishsa.
Excelente, pues muchísimas gracias por su tiempo, por enseñarnos y compartir la belleza de la lengua zapoteca, de su cultura, de compartirnos un poquito de esta gran cultura mexicana, oaxaqueña, y esperemos que sea una primera charla de muchas y de talleres que se puedan organizar en adelante. Simplemente les están dando las gracias Carmen Guerrero por esta charla, Aurelia Gómez Unamuno, comenta muchas gracias Felipe y Brook.
Ana González también, cónsul, está dando las gracias a Felipe y a Brook. Sí, pues sí, tienen muchas felicitaciones aquí, la gente lo está felicitando. Así es que, pues nada, a mí también, I also want to say thank you, both of you, Felipe, Brook, thank you, Consul, and well, if to all of you that you're listening or viewing us, please remember that we do these type of sessions at least once a month. These sessions of Art Never Ends, and I hope you follow us, and well, keep on watching because you guys are the ones that make these sessions live, actually. So thank you very much. Gracias, Cónsul. Gracias, Felipe. Gracias, Brook. Y pues nos vemos pronto.
Con gusto, con gusto. Y un saludo a la comunidad oaxaca californiana también.
Exacto.
Perfecto.
Que estén muy bien.
Gracias. Thank you.
Gracias, gracias.